Raga, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Fabian.
You're the co-founder of A21 AI, and you've worked with AWS and a number of exciting companies previously. Let's talk a little bit about your journey first, if that's okay.
Sure. Well, I've been in AI and tech for about 15 years now in various roles across various organizations. I previously had my own startup way back in 2011, which was AI-based healthcare in India. And I think it was the product fit was not just there in terms of where we wanted it to be. Then I went to head the Europe market for an IT services company called CTS Tech, which is doing some fantastic work in area of healthcare IT and innovative technologies around it. And then after that, I was with Udacity, covering autonomous vehicles and courses around it, sales as well as product development around AI and autonomous systems. And for the past 4 years, till Jan 2024, I was with Amazon in the cloud division, AWS, working with ISV customers in India, and I was heading a financial services vertical for ISVs in India. So that's
Super
my
exciting.
part of it.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. It's really interesting. What are some of the most exciting use cases for generative AI you've seen during your time with AWS, Audacity, and etc.?
Well, generative AI is fairly new. But I mean, Udacity, there was no generative AI at that time, but there was a lot of work around autonomous tech that we're working on. So, sensor fusion was one of the primary technologies that we're working on, as well as computer vision. So, mostly combination of computer vision and sensor fusion, where we developed the course curriculum. We even helped thousands of engineers at Infosys, upscale their workforce in autonomous vehicles and autonomous systems. Yeah. So very exciting to work on autonomous tech at that time. And generative AI is still a recent phenomena. So I've worked with customers at AWS to deploy generative AI based underwriting systems or contract and compliance systems. And then at the same time, post AWS, we've done about 20 odd customer POCs, ranging in, again, mostly financial services and credit, as well as insurance underwriting space, debt collection space. Then on healthcare and pharma side, in terms of analytics and Salesforce effectiveness. On the CPG and retail side, in virtual try-on, which is generative AI led, as opposed to the previous generation of virtual try-ons, which were augmented reality led, and they were not quite successful. And then work around a lot of work around CPG product mix and what the market is selling for one of the largest meat producers in this part of the world, Asia Pacific region. And then we worked a lot again in contract space as well. We developed a contract compliance solution for a customer, which basically looked at the metadata, extracted the key dates, and suggested what risks does the particular contract has, read through contract, filtered through the compliance and policy that a particular organization has. To identify the red flags and compliance checks. So a lot of varied industries level use cases. And on autonomous side, we've not done a project, but we've sort of created some assets around marketing side of things, around advertising. Creating print adverts for a particular brand, making sure the brand association is there and the logo, etc., is clear, which is very difficult to get in generative AI. You have to really fine tune a model to do that. And then other for some of the use cases that we are currently actually working on are in terms of your typical sales copilot and customer support copilot, where your sales advisors in the showrooms can will have ready access to all the information that they required through a voice or a text input, and they can tell you how their product is better against the competitor, in what sense, even personalized to the customer if they're coming on for a second time, or if they've provide some information, so even personalized to the customer. So if a customer wants to go off, off-roading, then they would highlight the 4x4. Otherwise, they would highlight a more family-friendly car. So things like that. And then there's a whole use case on the fleet side of things, on the logistics and the trucking business side of things, where
Mm,
fleet management and chat with your fleet data becomes very, very critical. And along on top of it, observability and self-healing co-pilots become very, very critical, where any issue comes up, a red flag is raised, and either driver can is given a input to fix that issue if possible on the spot, or connected to a technician, or if that is not possible, then routed to the nearest uh, uh, garage, or any place where they can get some help. So
mm,
these are some of the typical use cases that we have been working in auto space.
mm. First of all, thanks for
And
that. Yeah. Now, what I've seen from or heard from a number of people I talk to here on the podcast and offline is that
yeah,
there are loads of proof of concepts at the moment, and
yeah,
loads of them currently don't scale or live up to the initial sort of promises laid out in the business case. And I guess a term that consultants love to use are things around maturity or readiness. If you would look into and have to assess the Gen AI maturity of an organization, first of all, currently, do you see different levels of maturity across organizations? And what are some of the factors that would make up a higher level of or better level of maturity of an organization as it relates to Gen AI?
so there are two aspects of to your question. One is definitely there's a maturity level, and the maturity level is not in terms of whether they want to adopt GenAI or not, an organization. It's just that whether they're prepared or not, whether they have proper data strategy in place. To have an AI strategy, you need to have a proper data strategy in place, right? So
Mm,
you have to build those foundation steps to sort of take the next step. And we do help our customers take those steps in a even if it means it's only in a specific workflow.
mm,
So sometimes you don't need to boil the ocean. Sometimes you need to first fix a workflow end to end. So we do things like data wrangling and data cleansing and extraction for a particular workflow for a customer and solve that. So that's one part of it. The second part, when people say that they're not getting ROI, is likely because they're using one of the large LLMs like OpenAI and Claude, and those are great LLMs, and we work a lot with them. But in many use cases, they're like a bringing a tank to a knife fight, right? So when a job can be done by a smaller language model, then
mm,
it becomes much more cost effective. So we typically end up using combination of multiple language models, both large and small, open source as well as proprietary. Build everything over LangChain, so that the solution is at the end of the day ROI driven, builds a business case, and is cost effective. So, for example, if I have to run some analytics, my choice would be OpenAI. But if I have to do summarization, I'll probably go to Llama 2 or one of the smaller language models, right? Or if I have to, if it's a coding, then I would rather fine tune a code Llama, then which will help in the summarization of what and document generation of code. But code generation probably is better done by OpenAI or Cloud. Within that also, we've seen that back-end code is better written by OpenAI, front-end is better written by Cloud.
mm,
Maybe it's a use case that we had. Maybe it's not the case for everything, but it's just some of the projects that we've done. We realize that. So I think that the criticality is that using the right tool set and orchestrating those language models in an agentic sort of deployment, which is cost effective and provides ROI. So
mm.
yeah, those POCs have started happening, and we'll see deployments in that manner going forward.
That's fascinating. Just to be really explicit here, if an organization lands on a set of use cases they would like to develop, and now one of the sort of next questions is, what's the
Yeah.
right LLM approach? What are the specific areas or metrics you would look into to identify the right LLM for a given use case?
So there is a set of qualifiers which are publicly available, right? There are a lot of evaluation matrices that are there with respect to both summarization use cases, analytics use cases, math use cases, content generation use cases. So we do rely on those scores to figure out what works best. But at the end of the day, uh, it's also about the in what combination that they would work for us, right?
Mm,
For what particular use case. So, for example, um, there was a use case where in an underwriting, customers had to get some text extraction as well as the trending on the and creating the chart. So the chart creation was handled beautifully by OpenAI. They wrote a Python script that we can execute, and the text was handled beautifully by Claude. So and the difference was only for one word, right? So for the text it was show me sales figures for past 3 months. So that was a text
mm,
output, right? But then if the prompt was slightly changed, show me trend of revenue for past 3 months. The trend would indicate it's a chart. So then the OpenAI agent will get triggered. So doing the triaging as to what query should go to what agent and what LLM is also very very critical. So it's obviously a continuous process in understanding what kind of queries that a customer wants, building that knowledge base, and then again making sure that there's a right tool available for that, even the slightest change in the prompt. So we do use filters and triaging. We use LLMs actually for triaging these queries even before they go to subsequent downstream path. And then at the end of the day, we do an evaluation testing as well, whether for a particular set of queries, whether we're getting the right answer or not. This is a manual effort in many cases,
mm.
because that's right now the best way to do it. To be honest, that for a very small set, just make sure that everything is working fine, so that if something needs to be changed, then you change and then again do the evaluation. But once everything is working fine, then you know that you've got the right set of architecture. So typically, it doesn't require more than two feedback loops,
Mm.
but that's done pretty fast.
You mentioned initially that you work with a lot of companies on their data strategy, and that
Yeah.
the data strategy needs to be tied in with the AI strategy and might even be sort of a preceding element, a foundational element. What are some of the typical pitfalls, mistakes that you see with regards to large organizations' data strategies?
Well, silo data is still not solved problem, to be honest. So that's one critical piece, and then uh, it's just that one thing is that data is being siloed, but in multiple format, the same data is stored in multiple format, and once and there's no data lake. So these are some of the things that large. I'm not saying that enterprises don't do that. They follow a very stringent data strategy or data security strategy, but data is still very very siloed. I think that's one thing that really makes a big difference in terms of you know s- entire end-to-end digital transformation organization, and Gen AI and AI is a small piece of that.
Are there any particular, especially thinking about the recent rise of Gen AI,
Mm.
either in tools to, for example, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of, for example, digital product development, or Gen AI solutions as a product, whether for internal or external use? Are there any additional data requirements or implications for organizations that they need to be aware of?
There is, well, first thing first, the implication of using a language model is that you are giving your data to an external training model. So our effort is to make sure that the enterprise grade solutions are used. So with OpenAI, we use enterprise version of OpenAI. We favor open source simply because you can fork out a new model for a particular customer, and that a model you can use and you can train with respect to your own data, and that stays within your own secure, confined, IT environment and setup, and your training data doesn't or your data doesn't go out. So I think that's one of the biggest considerations when it comes to data and generative AI today.
You alluded to a very interesting point here. It's this sort of age-old question of make versus buy,
Yeah,
especially as it relates to Gen AI.
yeah.
What are some of the recommendations you would have for senior leaders that are at this point of what LLMs should be developed internally? Where should we rely on external parties? And then I've got a follow-up question related to skills afterwards as well.
Mhm. So we are seeing that IT leaders are looking at the build versus buy very seriously again. Um, the reason is that the core technologies, they will still keep to buy because they've invested a lot. Like a banking industry is not going to move away from core software, core banking software, right? But a lot of the non-core or allied software for which IT companies were paying 50, 60, 70, 80% margins on SaaS is notoriously very high in margins. So that they are starting to think that at a certain scale, we may just build ourselves. Like chatbot solutions, you don't need to buy them anymore now. So you can build some of these solutions at a very economic price point using your own data, using generative AI, using a fine-tuned model. Um, and second part is that a lot of these, in generative AI specifically, a lot of these are very customized solutions, so which are not there in a SaaS product, right? I mean, and typically earlier chatbots were rule-based, configure this, select one, select two, select three, and you can configure one, two, three, right? And you can configure the replies, and if you're not able to get the reply, then you can connect to an agent. In generative AI, that paradigm has changed because you can actually train models in a human-like speech, both in text as well as voice, and you can train on your own data. So it will be custom. It will be very customized to your data. It will be then personalized to customer who's talking to you. So therefore, a lot of these peripheral and non-core software will simply go away, and it will be uh, replaced by generative AI solutions. The second thing is that generative AI at a day-to-day usage level is percolating down in enterprise. So today everyone says I have a chatbot, right? And Salesforce can say I have a chatbot. Oracle can say I have a chatbot. So a user is not going to use 20 chatbots for their daily thing, or they're not even going to use 20 apps on Slack, right? Even the apps on Slack if they're created. So typically, what will end up is that you all the data coming from these enterprise applications is going to come at one place, and from there you can uh, based on the role based access, you can get the data. So a finance manager can say show me MIS for past 3 days, and at the same time can say, hey, can you book a PTO, or block 2 days off on 31st and 1st of let's say January for New Year's, right? 31st December and 1st of January for New Year, right? But at the same time, a marketing manager will not have access to MIS data, but they'll have access to their PRDs and their product related or the market research data. So role-based access to data combined with a layer of chat on top of all your enterprise applications is going to be future of the software, and how generative AI is going to interact with those software pieces in the future.
related to that, what I would be really curious to hear is sort of your thoughts on the implications for the workforce, especially sort of specific roles in the IT and digital areas. What are you already seeing today in terms of specific roles that are required for Gen AI, and how do you think this will change over the medium to long term in terms of specific skills that are will be more in demand and others potentially less so?
Uh, this well, lot of focus is currently going on hiring prompt engineers. I don't think that's going to be. It's a very transitionary job role and title. Okay, what you really need are good AI strategists in your organization. Somebody who can build a vision for how AI will be deployed in the organization. Right? It's almost like a chief AI officer. There are enough partners in the ecosystem like ours who can execute that. So there's always a merit in building your own team at a certain scale, but for most of the organization, it doesn't merit a $10 million investment in a team just for one particular use case in generative AI. Secondly, I think over a period of time, there would be enough internal tooling available where users will be able to leverage their own low code or no code generative AI solutions to
Mm,
build whatever they required on their own. So it would not require a lot of the a lot of I would say manpower at the customer side. Okay. Um, I think in the last conversation I mentioned the analogy of car, right? That today's software is like 1980s car. You have to press every button, you have to look everywhere, you have to manage every turn, every nook and corner, every blinker, clutch, pedal, accelerator, gear, everything you have to manage, right? But the future of generative AI is like a fully autonomous car. You just get in and either type or tell, take me to that place. So this is what going to happen in enterprise as well. You just need to make sure that you're ready to sort of become that car. So eventually a lot of the organizations will uh, move towards that role based chat layer, and they will be able to get the work done at much higher productivity. So the reality is that today's 10,000 employee enterprise can do the same revenues with generative AI and with probably 5,000 employees
mm,
if deployed correctly. Which is another way to say that they can, if they're really good at it, they can do double the revenues.
mm. Potentially a little bit of a provocative question, but these tools that enable the increased efficiency and or effectiveness of the development teams, do you think they will come from the established players like, I don't, we don't have to talk about specific names, but like AWS, Atlassian, Google, Meta, or do you think this will be new entrants that specialize in these tools and try to capture the market?
It's difficult to say because right now there's a lot of noise in the system,
Mm,
and I'm anyways not too fond of generative AI product as such because, as I said, every deployment is very customized. Every deployment is different. So for us, that's the
mm,
reason why we started a services business. So, but yes, in terms of some of the tools that will be there to enable that we've seen that both well-established organizations as well as new entrants have come in. So, to give you an example, I know AWS has have their own fine-tuning system, but then there is another interesting player called Monster API that we also work with, who relies on distributed computing to do such these things. And then there are other problems that are getting solved. So, for example, how do you get access to GPU when a model needs to have quick cold start? So, for
mm,
spiky workloads, problem is that model cold start is takes a lot of time. And when I say a lot of time, it's 2-3 minutes, and that's huge. in terms of spiky workloads where milliseconds matter. So serverless GPUs are gonna be very critical. So some of the problems are not solved by large companies that smaller startups are solving, and that's the beauty of a startup ecosystem.
You are now based in the US. You've previously worked in India. What
Yeah,
do you think, just thinking about sort of geographical differences and hotspots across the globe, where do
yeah.
you think are currently the sort of centers of gravity as it relates to the advancement and forefront of generative AI?
So I've been going to US fairly regularly on off for a while now. So it's not nothing new. It's not surprising that a lot of such innovation comes out of US, and we are seeing uh, and that's the ecosystem that also is mature in adoption as well. And we see some of that percolate down fairly quickly to Indian market, I would say. Earlier, I would earlier there was a tremendous amount of difference in terms of adoption of technology and percolation. Maybe 5 years when let's say cloud was launched early on, then
Mm,
mobile became on 2 year gap when the likes of Facebook and Instagram launched, and they were pretty much fairly easily available in India, but still with certain gap. Netflix came to India after a long while, and then India overtook in terms of data consumption and in terms of mobile apps are there. So somewhere it has overtaken, but new technologies take time to percolate down in the India as a enterprise level adoption. That is more critical. D2C apps are there's no difference between adoption and creation of something like a D2C apps.
mm,
There always a merit to the fact that US is a mature market, so the new models, business models will, which have worked there, may work here. But now I think there's a growing sense, and that's been there for a while, that something that works in India will work everywhere.
mm,
So from that perspective, we are seeing a lot of in GenAI. We are seeing um, new language models being developed which are specific to Indic languages, India specific languages, right? So they're like 30,
mm,
40 languages. Now that can be taken up in Europe, for example, which has a similar, uh, you know, I would say complexity when it comes to language. So that's something that you can sort of learn from. But yeah, the generative AI is the first paper was written by Google employees, and OpenAI, Claude, etc. They are from that ecosystem. So there's no denying
mm,
that innovation cycle is far ahead in US and in India. Same with adoption, but now it is percolating down. And also, I think it's the technology adoption also comes with ROI,
mm,
because in India the ROI is difficult to justify at the similar price points. I mean, OpenAI price point in India and US is same. So when purchasing power is one third, then it becomes difficult to justify such enormous and that similar speed of execution and deployment. So these things are definitely a consideration.
mm. You mentioned a couple of Gen AI use cases initially and throughout our conversation. If you would be a leader in one of the incumbent automotive companies, what are some of the possible Gen AI use cases you would look into today and or in the future?
Well, I think I touched briefly upon this. The first thing I would do is um, categorize my workflows into where there is lack of resources and resources are difficult to find. Legal is a great example.
Mm,
Good resources are expensive and difficult to find. And secondly, where there's a lot of data. So sales, again, legal is also one good example, but sales is a great example. Product development is a great example, right? So I would try to categorize those use cases and workflows, and then based on that, Some of the areas that we actually have gotten uh, in one queries, and we've done some work is again on sales and customer support copilot, on troubleshooting, which is to sort of say that service manuals are fed into system and they can give a reply. If you can click a photograph and say, this is my dashboard looking like, they're like 5 lights, I don't know what to do. So they can give answer that, okay, fine, these 5 lights means this, therefore you can do this immediately, this you have to do, take it into a garage, etc. And then there is a production side of things, which is from design side of things. Generative AI can be used in generating new designs, and you can use you can embed generative AI into tools that you already use, or you can create your own app where you can actually check for many things. Uh, when the generative AI design is created, you can give it parameters as to, this should be the coefficient of drag and so on and so forth, and this should be uh, this is how the design language is. You can actually train a model to make sure they understand your design language, and they create the design in line with the design language. And then there is another whole host of issues around legal and operations, plant operations, where again the whole idea is that you train a small language model on the plant manuals, which can run into hundreds and thousands of pages. And whenever the issue comes in, you either click a photo of the issue, or type in, or give a voice input, and they'll give you a reply. The system will give you a reply, so that you can save more time. You know, uh, for the time it takes to resolve that particular issue is quicker. So every minute the line or a part of line is down is basically revenue lost. So the
Mm.
quicker turnaround time, the less for the lesser time the plant is down or the line is down, the better it is in terms of revenue and costs.
Mm.
Yeah,
Final question from my side. Imagine
sure.
you're talking to some of the individuals that are in charge of the data and AI organizations at some of our incumbent automotive companies. What are some of the key points of advice that you would recommend them to implement to make Gen AI a success in their respective organizations?
Yeah. So I think that, I believe identifying the right use case is very, very critical. It varies organization to organization depending on where they are in their data maturity. Okay, and once you recognize a use case, go deep into it. Start with the POC, identify issues that you are facing in that POC, make sure that these issues are rectified, deploy the POC, so that one use case you have an understanding of how generative AI is giving you a good return. And then you can then start in the meanwhile start selecting other use cases and going after that. So as I said, I don't believe that the right thing is to boil the ocean, but pick your battles where you think that there is enough data, and there's enough requirement for that data to be leveraged. By leverage, it means either increasing revenues, increasing productivity, or decreasing cost. And there is huge manpower issue, which can mean that it's run by, maybe your turnaround or churn is high in terms of manpower, or it just requires a lot of manpower to get this thing done, and therefore there can be a lot of manual errors that get induced. So I would say look at these use cases and deploy generative AI there and see the results.
Thank you so much, Raga, for joining me today. That's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah. No, no, thank you so much. It's been wonderful for me as well.